My daughter-in-law has just committed the gravest error imaginable. About an hour back, a message popped up on my phone. I grabbed your vintage ring for the event, Grandma. Fingers crossed it's okay. I shot back cheerfully, enjoy yourself, sweetie. Right after, though, I picked up the phone and called my attorney, Frank Miller, instructing him, report the theft of asset number 847, that $3 million pink diamond ring. 60 minutes later, officers stormed the upscale soiree where Cynthia was showing off my gem, convinced she'd snagged some cheap bauble. If you're tuning in, hit subscribe and share your location since this tale will stun you silent. I'm Dolores, 71 years young, and over the last decade, I've been sidelined as the overlooked in-law, the elderly relative who disrupts holiday get-togethers. To Cynthia, I amounted to little more than a pesky senior squatting in the property my departed husband bequeathed me. She entered our clan 10 years ago by tying the knot with my boy, Louis. Right from the start, she positioned me as an outsider in my very own residence. Cynthia's the type who acts entitled to the universe's bounty, sophisticated, scheming, perpetually clad in lavish crimson and emerald frocks sparkling with pricey baubles that Louis splurged on just to appease her. The instant she crossed my threshold, she started bossing me around like hired help. Dolores, brew some coffee. Dolores, press my ebony gown for this evening. Dolores, tread lightly, my migraine's acting up. She never showed me any deference. In her eyes, I was merely the aged crone, as though I lacked a proper identity. During meals with the family, she discussed me like I was absent. Louis, maybe your mom ought to check into assisted living. This place is overwhelming for her years. And my son, my flesh and blood, would drop his gaze and mutter, Mom's okay right here, Cynthia. Deep down, I sensed the shift. Louis started eyeing me with unease, like I was an encumbrance. Cynthia had gradually twisted his thoughts, murmuring that I was past my prime for managing a sprawling estate, that they required the rooms for their ambitions. She envisioned converting my parlor into her private workspace, reshaping the yard my husband and I nurtured across 4 decades into a trendy leisure spot. For years, I swallowed her insults without a word. With visitors around, she'd present me as Louis's mom, skipping any nod to my ownership of the home. At her bashes, I'd retreat to my quarters because, in her view, seniors unsettle the crowd. Some evenings, I'd weep quietly, pondering how I'd faded into the background of the haven I'd crafted with endless affection. What Cynthia and the rest of the household never realized was that my late spouse, Mario, gifted me far beyond this dwelling. In our final stretch together, Mario quietly amassed priceless artworks, gems, and heirlooms. And he appreciated my low-key nature, my aversion to ostentation, and relied on me to steward his inheritance wisely. Concealed in a vault behind a canvas in my sleeping quarters lay treasures totaling more than $15 million. Included was the very ring Cynthia had swiped, a 5-carat pink diamond creation from a Parisian artisan in 1920, appraised at $3 million. To the untrained eye, it could pass for a tasteful relic, but connoisseurs recognized it as a gem of unparalleled craft. That day, Cynthia had a high-profile fundraiser, one of those posh affairs where elite spouses parade their wardrobe and vie for the flashiest adornments. I'd overheard her griping for days about lacking the ideal match for her gilt gown. She'd flipped through glossies of jewels, groaning that her favorites exceeded even the ample allowance Louis provided. Earlier, while tending to the blooms in the yard, I caught her slipping into my space uninvited. It wasn't her initial invasion of my privacy, yet this occasion stood apart. I observed her rifling through my trinket case, that modest oak box holding lesser valuables, and her gaze fixed on the pink diamond. She lifted it, held it to the sun, and flashed that smug grin she reserved for moments she deemed a score. An hour on, that note arrived. I borrowed your old ring for the party, Grandma. Hope you don't mind. She lacked even basic manners to seek approval up front. She simply seized it, presuming my belongings were fair game. that I was too frail and irrelevant to own anything worthwhile. Reading those words ignited a fire in me. For a full 10 years, I'd tolerated her scorn, her dismissals, her biting jabs at my years and alleged irrelevance. But pilfering my ring sans consent, that particular ring, a crown jewel from Mario's hidden trove, proved the breaking point. I settled into my patio seat staring at the text on my cell, and for the first time in ages, a real smile crossed my face. "Enjoy yourself, sweetheart," I texted back. Right after, though, I phoned Frank, my reliable attorney. Frank had shared a deep bond with Mario as his closest confidant, the sole person privy to the details of our concealed wealth. "Frank," I declared, my tone steadier than it had been in years, "we need to initiate the safeguard plan you and Mario crafted. Cynthia has just swiped inventory piece 847. A pause hung on the line, followed by Frank's chuckle. "Dolores, are you completely certain about proceeding? Once we start this, there's no reversing course." I assured him that, indeed, following a decade of indignities, it was high time my daughter-in-law discovered precisely who she was up against. Frank outlined the strategy. Over the years, he'd meticulously recorded every item in Mario's assortment, formally cataloging them as premium assets complete with unique identifiers. Each one came with verification documents, recent valuations, and crucially, comprehensive protection policies. The ring Cynthia grabbed was officially documented as Item 847, appraised at $3 million. "I'll contact the insurer right away," Frank informed me. Per the protocol, any authorized removal of a cataloged item triggers an instant theft declaration. Within half an hour, authorities would secure a search order to retrieve the pilfered good, regardless of its location. As Frank handled the arrangements, I settled into the den and reflected on the countless instances when Cynthia had rendered me insignificant. Like that evening, she organized a meal for Lewis's professional associates and instructed me to dine in the kitchen due to limited seating at the table. Or last holiday season, when she unwrapped lavish presents from Louis, only to pass me an inexpensive wrap while commenting, "We picked something basic for you since, at your stage, you probably don't require much else." The memory that stung deepest was from her book group gathering when her pals arrived. I was lounging in my cherished seat in the parlor, absorbed in a novel, until she entered and announced to the crowd, "Dolores, mind heading to your quarters. We'd like some seclusion for our discussion." Her companions gazed at me with sympathy, as though I were a worn-out companion to be shooed aside. Yet the sharpest wound came from the exchange I eavesdropped on just days ago. Cynthia was chatting with her sibling Gretchen via phone, and her words carried clearly down the corridor. "This elderly lady is pushing me to the brink," she vented. "She occupies this grand residence like royalty, yet check out her frumpy outfits, her tacky baubles. It's laughable. Louis and I keep hoping she'll opt for assisted living, but she's far too obstinate. Once she's gone, I'll overhaul the whole place, kicking out all her hideous relics to the curb." That exchange marked the turning point where I resolved to speak up no longer. Cynthia didn't just scorn me, she scorned the legacy Mario and I had forged. She remained oblivious that those detested relics she loathed held value exceeding her potential earnings across multiple lifetimes. Frank rang me again. "All set, Dolores. The theft claim is formally submitted. The ring's flagged as missing property worth $3 million. I've supplied the cops with the venue details for the fundraising event. They're directed to reclaim the item without delay." "And Cynthia?" I inquired. Frank paused. "Legally, Dolores, she's guilty of major theft. A $3 million sum means potential multi-year incarceration under the statutes. But as the aggrieved party, you hold the choice: pursue prosecution or merely reclaim the asset." I said I'd mull it over. At that moment, I simply yearned to witness Cynthia's expression upon grasping how thoroughly she'd misjudged the worthless senior she so thoroughly dismissed. 60 minutes post-report, my device buzzed. Louis was on the line, his voice laced with sheer alarm. "Mom, what's happening?" Officers stormed Cynthia's soiree. They're claiming she pilfered a $3 million ring. This must be some awful error." "No error, my boy," I responded evenly. "Your spouse lifted a priceless artifact from your dad's holdings without consent. That band is precisely valued at $3 million, and she lacked any claim to it." "What holdings? What's this about? Dad never owned anything nearing $3 million. Mom, you must reach out to the authorities and clarify it's a mix-up." It was staggering. Even my son remained in the dark regarding the riches his father had amassed. Mario had gone to great lengths to shield his assets and acquisitions, keeping them hidden from Louis, too. He aimed to shield us from the perils of overt affluence, abductors, swindlers, opportunistic kin surfacing for handouts. "Louis," I stated, "plenty about your dad and myself remains unknown to you. Your partner has committed a grave blunder, and she'd have to deal with the fallout by herself. Mom, are you out of your mind? Cynthia's in tears. They're handling her like some kind of felon. Her pals are capturing the whole scene on their cell phones. Her standing is destroyed." "Her standing?" I echoed. "And what about the decade I've put up with her acting like dirt under my feet in my very own house? What about all those instances she shamed me publicly? What about that chat where she informed her sibling I was worthless?" Louis went quiet. He was fully aware of which discussion I meant since he'd overheard it himself and hadn't lifted a finger to back me up. "Mom, I beg you," he uttered at last. "Cynthia can be a handful at times, but she shouldn't end up behind bars over a mix-up." "It wasn't any mix-up, Louis. It was outright stealing. And now your spouse is about to discover that the lady she scorned so deeply isn't the powerless senior she imagined." I ended the call and settled into quiet reflection, absorbing the events that had unfolded. My boy, my flesh and blood, had observed his partner belittling me for 10 years without ever speaking out in my support. With the repercussions finally hitting, he expected me to step in and rescue Cynthia from her own hubris, but I refused. For the first time in 10 years, I wouldn't play the role of the unseen figure who swallowed every slight without a word. 20 minutes on, Frank showed up at my place with Patrick in tow, a private investigator he'd collaborated with for years. Patrick was a sharp-dressed pro in his 50s, focused on scams and artwork heists. Dolores. Frank explained that Patrick had quietly probed into Cynthia's dealings over the last 6 months, right after you shared your doubts about her behavior. I was taken aback. "What doubts? I never mentioned suspecting Cynthia to you." Frank grinned. "Recall that talk we had back in December, when you noted some of your minor items had shifted, and your jewelry case seemed disturbed multiple times." "Yeah, I did recall. I'd chalked it up to my mind playing tricks, the haze of getting older. Those weren't mere slips, Dolores. I chose to look into it on the down low, and Patrick's findings stretch way past that ring from today." Patrick pulled out a dossier packed with photos and papers. "Mrs. Dolores, your son's wife has been offloading items from your collection for nearly 2 years now, starting with minor stuff. Vintage pins, pearl studs, a silver chain, items you could have figured were misplaced or tucked away somewhere." My pulse quickened. "We've got records of no fewer than 12 transactions at local pawnbrokers and vintage shops around town. The combined worth of what she's fenced comes to roughly $45,000. I could hardly process it. Cynthia hadn't just demeaned me and acted like I didn't exist. She'd been pilfering from me for years. But how? How did she pick out what to grab without me catching on?" "She's sharp," Patrick went on. "She targeted pieces you seldom used or that sat buried in your bottom drawers. It seems she'd been keeping a mental inventory of your jewels for years, spotting which ones she could snag without you spotting the gap right away. On top of that, we've got proof she's snapped pics of your prized possessions, likely to gauge future targets for sale." Frank chimed in that Patrick had audio from Cynthia at 3 separate pawnbrokers, where she blatantly fibs about where the jewels came from. In one clip, she calls them family relics from her late grandma. In another, she insists her husband gifted them, but she's short on cash for a health crisis. A surge of rage and treachery washed over me like nothing before. For 2 years, as I blamed myself for misplacing things and worried my recall was slipping, Cynthia had methodically robbed me and then deceived others to peddle my treasures. Even worse, she'd plotted broader thefts, covertly documenting my holdings. There's additional info, Patrick noted, flipping to the following sheet in the dossier. Her buying habits don't line up with the earnings she and your son report. Over the past 2 years, Cynthia's splurged more than $30,000 on outfits, pricey therapies, lavish getaways, and upscale dining spots. When we stack those costs against the funds from hawking your jewels, it all aligns spot on. So the cash Cynthia poured into those fancy crimson and emerald gowns, the luxury purses she flaunted to lord over me, the costly footwear she wielded to crush my confidence, it all stemmed from unloading my possessions. She'd bankrolled her opulent life by robbing the very elder she held in such contempt. "Hold on," I interjected. "If you'd uncovered this months ago, why keep it from me?" Frank shared a glance with Patrick. "Dolores, we required sufficient proof to assemble an airtight case. Plus, I chose to hold off until she slipped up in a way that left no room for excuses or twisting the facts. The pilfering of that $3 million ring today was precisely the blunder I'd been anticipating." Right then, my phone buzzed once more. An unfamiliar caller, yet I picked up. It was a female voice I didn't know, laced with unease. "This is Detective Margaret Garcia with the Metropolitan Police. We're here at the Plaza Hotel alongside your daughter-in-law, Cynthia. She's claiming you authorized her to borrow the ring and that this whole thing is just a mix-up. Would you mind coming over to sort it out?" "Detective Garcia," I responded firmly. "Cynthia swiped that ring without my approval. I've got the text from her where she confesses to grabbing it without getting clearance first. Plus, it's worth $3 million and belongs to a duly documented collection." "I get it, ma'am," she said, "but your daughter-in-law is pretty distressed, and your son is with us too, pushing hard that it has to be some kind of error. He insists you've never had jewelry that pricey and that the valuation might be off." I let out a chuckle that caught even Frank and Patrick off guard. "Detective, what my son means is that I couldn't possibly own anything so extravagant because he figures I'm either too broke or too dim to manage it." A heavy pause hung on the line. "Well, ma'am, he did bring up how you get by on a basic retirement income and never flaunted that level of affluence." "Detective Garcia," I shot back, "I'll head there within the hour, lawyer in tow, along with every paper proving the ring is rightfully mine, and that Cynthia's been helping herself to my things for years. I fully anticipate that by the time I show up, she'll be detained properly, given she's nicked property topping $3 million in value." Once I ended the call, I turned to Frank and Patrick. "Gentlemen, Cynthia and my son are about to discover just who they've been crossing for all this time." Frank grinned. "Dolores, anything more I need to be aware of before we head out?" Patrick chimed in. "We found out Cynthia's been chatting with an art valuer called Mark, sending him pics of various items from your holdings. Looks like she had designs on a bigger haul. From the tapes, she figured she could offload a bunch of your artworks and statues for a cool $200,000 at minimum." Patrick continued, "Mrs. Dolores, your daughter-in-law doesn't just dismiss you as a pointless elderly lady. She treats you like an easy mark for endless profit with zero fallout." From the recordings of her call with that valuer, she'd actually boasted, "The old bat hasn't a clue about her own treasures. I could walk off with half of it and she'd be none the wiser. She's way too doddering to track what she's got." Those remarks hit me like a punch to the gut. Cynthia wasn't merely thieving from me, she was mocking me, deeming me idiotic and irrelevant enough to overlook her schemes. She'd plotted a major heist, banking on what she saw as my frailty. "Frank," I declared, rising from my seat with a resolve that had lain dormant for ages, "I need you to file charges across the board against Cynthia, not just for the ring incident today, but for every swipe she's made in the last 2 years, and make sure my son, Louis, grasps the full scope of the partner he picked." "Are you dead certain, Dolores?" he pressed. "Going public like this means the whole family learns about Mario's wealth and Cynthia's misdeeds. No turning back once it's out." I gazed through the window at the garden Mario and I had nurtured over 4 decades, the one Cynthia aimed to bulldoze for her trendy party space. Memories flooded in of the slights I'd swallowed, the moments I'd faded into the background in my own house, the sleepless nights questioning if I truly was the worthless figure she painted me as. "Frank," I resolved, "it's high time this doddering old soul shows them a reckoning they'll carry forever." Pulling up to the Plaza Hotel, the chaos unfolded just as I'd pictured it. 5 patrol cars clogged the front, with local journalists swarming in on the buzz and clusters of gala attendees from the charity event drifting out, murmuring and gesturing. This was prime fodder for the elite circles in our town, gossip that would linger for ages. Stepping into the lobby, my eyes locked on Cynthia right away. She perched on a plush leather couch, flanked by 3 officers. For the first time in a decade, she shed that poised, sophisticated air. Mascara trails smeared her flawless face, her gold gown hung rumpled, and cuffs bound her wrists out front. The ring, my 3 million ring, had vanished from her hand. Lewis hovered nearby, waving his arms wildly in debate with a detective. Spotting me stride in with Frank and Patrick, his face twisted from panic to outright rage. He charged over, and I could tell from his glare, in his gaze, he held me responsible, not his dishonest spouse, for the whole mess. "Mother, you need to sort this out immediately," he shouted at me amid the packed lobby full of people. "Cynthia's getting shamed in public because of what you've done. Her pals are posting clips online. Her good name is totally destroyed. Her reputation," I echoed, holding my tone steady despite the fury boiling within me. "Lewis, your spouse swiped a ring worth $3 million from me. This isn't some mix-up with a cheap bauble. It's outright grand larceny. But Mom, you never mentioned owning something that pricey. Had we been aware, none of this would have gone down. Cynthia figured it was merely some outdated junk jewelry." Frank moved in and passed Lewis a hefty dossier. "Mr. Lewis, these papers verify the ring's worth, complete with authenticity certificates and coverage details. Your spouse didn't pilfer some outdated trinket. She took a priceless antique gem appraised at $3 million. Lewis flipped through the dossier, and I observed his face shift from skepticism to utter astonishment. This can't possibly be true. Dad actually owned these items. Why keep it all under wraps from us? Because your dad believed it wiser to shield our assets from prying eyes," I clarified. "And given how your wife has been pilfering from me for 2 years now." Clearly, he had the right idea. "Pilfering from you for 2 years. What on earth do you mean?" Patrick advanced and presented Lewis with the full dossier on Cynthia. Images of her at the pawnbrokers, audio clips of her fibbing about where my jewels came from, transaction slips. It was all compiled there. "Your wife, Mr. Lewis, has been methodically offloading your mother's possessions over the last 2 years. We've got records of pilfered goods adding up to $45,000. Lewis stood mute, poring over the proof. I watched his reality shatter right there. The partner he'd wed, the one who'd let me endure a decade of disdain, turned out to be a crook preying on his very own mom. That's when Detective Garcia drew near. "Mrs. Dolores, I'd like your formal statement on a few points. Did you authorize your daughter-in-law to borrow the ring involved?" "No way," I stated resolutely. "I've got the text right here where she confesses to grabbing it without my okay. In my book, snatching items without consent amounts to stealing. And can you verify the ring's ownership is legally yours?" Frank cut in. "Detective, these legal papers cover it all. The ring was acquired by Mrs. Dolores's deceased husband back in 1975. It's listed in his will, insured at full value, and included in the formal estate inventory she inherited." The detective scanned the files and gave a nod. "Looks solid to me. Mrs. Dolores, are you intent on filing charges against your daughter-in-law?" Before I could respond, Cynthia wailed from her spot. Dolores, I beg you. It was merely a mix-up. You realize I'd never mean to harm you on purpose. I've always shown you deference. I pivoted toward her deliberately. For the first time in a decade, Cynthia addressed me with raw pleading rather than scorn. For once, she required my mercy instead of acting like I didn't exist. Deference, I queried, approaching her seated area. You consider a decade of belittling me as deference. You think banishing me to dine in the kitchen during company counts as deference. You call 2 years of thieving from me and labeling me senile as deference. Terror flooded her eyes. Thieve from you? I haven't taken a single thing of yours. This is the only instance I've touched your stuff. Patrick edged nearer and displayed the images of her at the pawn spots. Mrs. Cynthia, we've captured photos and footage of you hawking your mother-in-law's items on no fewer than 12 separate times in the last 2 years. Cynthia's complexion drained to ashen. She glanced at the pics, then me, then Louis, scrambling for any defense to bail her out. Those were merely trivial items I assumed you no longer wanted, she muttered. I figured you wouldn't even spot them gone. I assumed you'd lost track of them. And that justified you taking them, I pressed, and fabricating stories at the pawn shops, claiming they were family relics from your grandma. Louis stared at her aghast. Cynthia, did you truly pull that off? Did you actually plunder my mother's possessions for years? Cynthia sobbed more intensely. Louis, you understand our desperate need for cash. You know your paycheck couldn't sustain the life we craved, and she owns piles of stuff. I assumed she'd overlook a handful of minor losses. But they weren't yours to claim, Louis bellowed. They belonged to my mother, and you convinced me her mind was fading whenever she inquired about her missing pieces. That's the instant it hit me what had truly unfolded. Cynthia hadn't. Yeah, not only had she been pilfering from me for years, but she'd also been gaslighting Louis into thinking I was slipping into dementia. Whenever I'd point out a missing item, she'd murmur to him that it was just typical for older folks to misplace stuff and draw a blank on where they'd left it. Detective Garcia, I stated, a profound sense of tranquility washing over me. I'm pressing every charge available against my daughter-in-law, not just for the ring incident today, but for all the robberies she's pulled off in the last 2 years. No, Cynthia wailed. Please, Dolores, I'll return it all. I'll make full restitution. Don't ruin me like this. I met her gaze squarely. Cynthia, for a full decade, you've acted like I didn't exist. You've shamed me before company. You've left me feeling like dead weight in my own house. Over those 2 years, you've taken what's mine while convincing me my mind was failing. And now that it's all catching up, you're begging for pity. But I had no idea it was that bad. I never realized you owned such pricey items. If I'd understood I had valuables, would you have swiped even more? I paused, letting that sink in. Cynthia, the issue isn't your ignorance of the worth of what you took. It's the fact that you took from me at all. It's that for 10 years, you've discarded me like garbage. Frank stepped up to the detective. Detective Garcia, we're filing charges for the other verified thefts too. We've got solid proof for at least 12 more instances of larceny. The detective gave a nod. Got it, Mrs. Cynthia. You're being arrested on charges of first-degree grand larceny, numerous counts of petty theft, and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. As Detective Garcia recited Cynthia's Miranda rights, I turned to my son, Louis. He watched in stunned silence as his spouse was formally taken into custody, at last grasping that the partner he'd wed was a crook who'd preyed on his mother for years. "Mom," he uttered, his voice cracking. I had no clue about any of this. "You have to trust me on that, Louis," I answered. "Maybe the stealing flew under your radar, but you were fully aware of how Cynthia demeaned me. You witnessed each insult, each snub, every instant she erased me from our home, and you stayed mute." Louis dropped his eyes, unable to face me. Deep down, he recognized the truth in my words. For 10 years, he'd passively observed his wife marginalize me, transforming me into an outsider under my own roof. He'd opted for the path of least resistance, ignoring it all, avoiding any clash, failing to stand by his mother. With the reality now exposed, he confronted the cost of his inaction. "Mom," he murmured, "I figured you and her would sort it out eventually." I believed staying out of it would let everything smooth over. "Problems like that don't fix themselves, Lewis," I countered. "Not when someone's deliberately mistreating another. Your wife didn't just belittle me for a decade. She robbed me blind, twisted my reality, and schemed for more. And you imagined it'd vanish on its own." While I confronted Louis, I noticed a few attendees from the charity event capturing the drama on their smartphones. The tale of the wealthy mother-in-law nabbing her pilfering daughter-in-law would spread like wildfire across social platforms by night's end. For Cynthia, whose whole persona revolved around portraying the poised, upstanding spouse, this scandal stung worse than prison bars. Detective Garcia wrapped up the Miranda rights and started leading Cynthia out. Yet before they hit the door, she whirled toward me, her face twisted in an unfamiliar rage, raw, frantic desperation. "Dolores, you have no idea what you've unleashed," she shrieked. "You've wrecked my life. My circle, my standing, it's all in ashes. And for what? Some tacky ring you never even flaunted." "No," I responded evenly. "For 10 years of swindling, degradation, and abuse, the ring today was merely the breaking point." "But I handed you a family," she raged on. "I delivered grandkids you wouldn't have otherwise. Lewis and I gave your later years meaning." That was the most absurd claim I'd encountered in ages. "Cynthia, you didn't build me a family. You fractured it, turning relatives into folks who saw me as a nuisance. And regarding grandkids, wasn't it you two who chose childlessness? You claimed kids would wreck your physique and derail your ambitions." Lewis shifted, visibly squirming with each accusation spilling from his wife's lips. At that moment, he seemed to truly see her, cunning, self-absorbed, ready to fabricate tales the second her deeds backfired. "Dolores," Cynthia bellowed as the detective urged her forward. "Push this through and you'll alienate your son for good. Louise will never pardon you for shattering his union." I glanced at Lewis. He lingered there, observing his wife lash out. While Cynthia hurled insults during her arrest for pilfering items from his own mom, Lewis, I asked, "Is that really your view? Do you believe I ruined your relationship?" Lewis stayed quiet for what felt like an eternity, absorbing all the revelations from those past couple of hours. His spouse wasn't the refined and worldly lady he imagined he'd captured. Instead, she was a pilferer who'd preyed on his aging mother for years, all while deceiving him into thinking his mom's memory lapses indicated senility. "No, Mom," he eventually replied. "My union fell apart the instant Cynthia chose to take from you initially. I simply hadn't grasped it back then." For once, Cynthia was at a loss for words. She'd relied on Lewis to pin her troubles on me, just like he'd done repeatedly in the past. Yet now, the proof was undeniable, and the fabrications too blatant. Once Cynthia had been escorted out, Patrick passed me another dossier. "Mrs. Dolores, there's more you should understand. In our probe, we uncovered that Cynthia had reached out to a lawyer focused on estates and legacies. It seems she was exploring methods to contest your father-in-law's testament should you no longer be around." Lewis appeared more nauseated by the second. "What does that imply?" "It implies," Frank clarified, "that your partner wasn't just robbing his mother right now. She was scheming ahead, probing ways to claim the full legacy once his mother passed." Patrick chimed in. "We located messages between Cynthia and that attorney about potentially ruling your mother unfit mentally. The scheme involved proving you suffered from senile dementia, thus stripping you of the ability to oversee your assets or estate." A chill shot through my veins. She intended to label me mentally unfit. "Indeed," Patrick went on. In a particular message, Cynthia noted your habit of misplacing items, suggesting it as proof of cognitive deterioration. Naturally, we realize now you weren't misplacing anything. She was swiping it. Louis slumped into a seat in the waiting area. My God, he muttered. She was set on taking every last bit from you. Furthermore, Frank noted, we learned she'd been urging Louis to persuade you to relocate to an assisted living facility. With you placed there, securing a judicial ruling on your mental unfitness would have been far simpler. I recalled all those talks where Cynthia gently implied I was past the point of independent living, that I required expert assistance, that I'd thrive in a community tailored for seniors like me. It wasn't sincere worry. It was a deliberate ploy to appropriate my wealth. Mrs. Dolores, Patrick stated, your son's wife is far more perilous than we first assumed. This isn't merely a case of someone who grabbed a few trinkets on a whim. This is about a person who'd crafted an extended scheme to plunder your complete estate and deem you mentally unfit to make it lawful. Louis raised his gaze and met my eyes, his own brimming with tears. Mom, I had no inkling of any of this. When Cynthia brought up the assisted living idea, I figured it stemmed from real worry for your health. Louis, I replied, settling beside him, your spouse played you just as she did me. She precisely knew the words to use to convince you her motives were pure. Frank shut his file and regarded me intently. Dolores, given this array of proof, the prosecutor might propose a deal for Cynthia. Based on our approach, she could end up with 5 to 15 years behind bars, and the funds she's already taken, I inquired. Many of the items she offloaded went to anonymous buyers, Patrick detailed. We'll manage to locate and reclaim about 60% of the pilfered amount. The remainder was likely already blown on her extravagant ways. Louis exhaled heavily. Mom, where do we go from here? What becomes of me? What about our household? That was a solid query. Over just 2 hours, my kin had undergone a total upheaval. My son's wife was in custody, staring down potential years incarcerated. My boy had at last comprehended he'd wed a felon intent on stripping me of all I had, and I, the supposedly doddering elder who'd faded into the background for a decade, had abruptly become the focal point. Louis, I told him, clasping his hand, what comes next is your chance to choose the person you aim to become. For 10 years, you'd quietly enabled your wife's poor treatment of me. Now that you see her true nature, the real issue is how you'll act on that knowledge. Mom, I yearn to set things straight with you. I want to atone for the years I failed to stand up for you. Atonement isn't regarding finances, Louis. It's centered on dignity. It's about ensuring no one ever again makes me feel unseen in my own. Heading back home, Louis gave a nod. I can crash with you tonight. I don't want to be by myself after everything that's happened. For the first time in a decade, my son was actually requesting my support, rather than insisting I bend to his wife's whims. Naturally, you can stay, Louis, I assured him, but come morning we have to have a real talk about mending our bond. As we departed the hotel, I noticed the tale already hitting the local broadcasts. Wealthy senior woman nabs pilfering daughter-in-law with $3 million diamond. Come tomorrow, the whole town would learn that Dolores, the overlooked elder, had revealed herself as a force far stronger than anyone suspected. The following morning, I stirred awake with a fresh sense of self. After 10 years, I was rising in my own residence without that nagging feeling of being an outsider. Louis had crashed in his former bedroom, and as I descended for breakfast, there he was in the kitchen, brewing coffee. It marked the first occasion in 10 years that anyone had prepared something for me in my own space, instead of anticipating I'd cater to all their needs. "Morning, Mom," he greeted. His tone carried a new quality, genuine regard, a quiet remorse woven into each syllable. "Morning, son." I settled at the dining table where Mario and I had shared meals for 4 decades, the very spot where Cynthia had long made me feel like an unwanted visitor. Louis set a mug of coffee before me and took the seat opposite. Mom, I tossed and turned all night. I kept replaying the ways Cynthia mistreated you and how I stayed silent. I recalled every instance you said an item was missing, and I chalked it up to your forgetfulness. Lewis, I cut in gently, don't beat yourself up over being played. Cynthia's sharp as a tack. She masterfully framed it all to look like concern for my health while she siphoned off my belongings. But I'm your boy, he pressed. I should have backed you. I should have spotted the red flags. I sipped my brew and met his gaze steadily. The key now is your path forward. So will you fight to salvage a union with a woman who schemed to plunder my assets and brand me as unstable? Lewis went quiet for what felt like ages. I watched the turmoil etch across his features. He'd been wed to Cynthia for 10 years. No matter the revelations, she remained his spouse. Just then the phone buzzed. It was Frank. Dolores, I've got big updates. The DA's eager to see you this morning. Turns out Cynthia's mess runs deeper than we figured. Deeper in what way? They raided her place last night and uncovered a hidden chamber in the basement. Dolores, your daughter-in-law, wasn't merely dipping into your pockets. She's orchestrated a racket in antique theft and fencing, pulling in multiple affluent households around town. My pulse quickened. Explain that. Investigators turned up over 50 artworks and jewels that aren't hers or Lewis's. Seems she's leveraged her entree to elite gatherings to scout marks, then coordinated sophisticated heists. Your home wasn't just another hit. It served as her headquarters. Lewis blanched. You're telling me our place has been a hub for crime all these years? Frank pressed on. And there's additional dirt. Documents show Cynthia peddling intel to pro-crooks. Blueprints, routines, alarm details. The FBI stepping in now since this syndicate spans borders. I reeled from the news. The very woman who dined at my table for a decade, slumbered beneath my eaves, and partaken of my provisions hadn't just robbed me. She'd orchestrated an illicit network right from my hearth. Frank, what about Lewis? Could they tag him as involved? The feds will grill him, sure. But evidence so far clears Louis of any awareness in his wife's schemes. She went to great lengths to shield him from it all. Once the call ended, Lewis and I lingered in heavy quiet. The house Mario and I had crafted with such devotion had been desecrated in depths I was only starting to grasp. Mom, Lewis ventured at last, how could I spend 10 years hitched to a crook without a clue? Because that's how she designed it, I responded. Folks like Cynthia excel at dividing their worlds. To you, she was the polished partner at Gallus. To me, the belittling in-law. To her marks, the cunning burglar plotting scores. She walled off every facet airtight. An hour on, Frank showed up with 2 FBI operatives in tow. Agent Karen Brooks and Agent Michael Smith presented themselves and outlined how Cynthia's affair now folded into a nationwide probe of an art and relic swindle. That had been running for multiple years. Agent Brooke informed Mrs. Dolores, "We suspect your daughter-in-law turned your residence into a hub for operations over the past 3 years at minimum. Links have surfaced to burglaries across 6 states. Agent Smith chimed in. This situation stands out because Cynthia devised an advanced strategy. Rather than hitting arbitrary residences, she built ties with affluent households, observed their properties amid gatherings, and passed those insights to skilled burglars. Yet how did she conceal it all? Lewis wondered. Your spouse possesses remarkable smarts, Agent Brooks clarified. She avoided any hands-on involvement in the actual break-ins. Her function centered on collecting intel and enabling the scheme. She frequented fundraisers, upscale meals, exhibit unveilings, and committed to memory specifics on fellow attendees' residences and valuables. Agent Smith presented a dossier packed with images. We've uncovered scores of snapshots she snapped covertly at those occasions. Shots of artwork, statues, gems on other ladies, plus captures of alarm setups and floor plans. I examined the pictures and spotted numerous properties right away. They belonged to folks I recognized, ladies I'd crossed paths with at benevolent functions for ages. Turning to Agent Brooks, I inquired, "So does that imply additional households fell prey to Cynthia? We've pinpointed no fewer than 12 so far. The combined worth of the heists tied to her setup surpasses $2 million. Lewis appeared utterly shattered. "Agent Smith," he ventured, "what awaits me? Will they assume I played a role?" "Mr. Lewis, our examination of your finances, messages, and routines shows zero signs of awareness or involvement in your wife's illicit endeavors. Still, we require your complete support in our probe." Agent Brooks met my gaze squarely. "Mrs. Dolores, anything more we should be aware of?" Upon detaining Cynthia yesterday evening, she started bargaining right away. She's proposing details on her full illicit web for a lighter penalty. Such as what? Identities of every partner, insights into unresolved thefts, spots holding pilfered items. She's prepared to dismantle her whole syndicate to dodge 2 decades behind bars. Frank shifted closer. And the implications for Dolores? What sentence might Cynthia serve if she assists? Should her statements aid in resolving connected matters and capturing the remaining syndicate figures, she might get 5 to 8 years rather than 20 to 25. Lewis exhaled heavily. Thus, even in custody now, Cynthia's scheming to twist the process for her gain. "That's the hallmark of clever offenders," Agent Smith noted. "They invariably plot a way out." Once the federal agents departed, I lingered in the den, grappling with the revelations. For years, my dwelling served as the nerve center for unlawful dealings. The lady who'd rendered me overlooked had exploited our space to orchestrate offenses against peers from similar circles. "Mom," Lewis murmured, settling beside me, "how do we navigate this? How can I reconstruct my existence after realizing I've shared a decade-long union with an outlaw?" I regarded my boy, this 40-year-old fellow who abruptly resembled a bewildered kid. "Lewis, you'll handle it just as I intend to. You'll resolve not to allow Cynthia to shape your future. She deceived you. She pilfered from me and leveraged our kin for her felonious aims. But with the facts exposed, we hold the authority to shape our response. And your plans, Mom?" I grinned, sensing a vigor absent for years. "Son, I'm set to reveal the authentic Dolores to everyone, ensuring no other household endures our ordeal." The ensuing days erupted into a frenzy of changes that reshaped my world entirely. Frank had arranged a media briefing featuring me as the primary target of Cynthia's wrongdoing, yet also as the figure who'd exposed the vast conspiracy. After a decade, I'd finally claimed the spotlight for valid motives. On the briefing morning, I rose at dawn and selected my finest jade gown, the one acquired for my marital milestone with Mario, untouched due to Cynthia's mocking jabs at my dated attire. I donned the surviving ornaments from my trove. Those Cynthia failed to swipe, and for the first instance in 10 years, I embodied the refined, commanding lady I am at heart. Lewis assisted my arrival at the venue. "Mom," he uttered entering, "I'm truly proud. I realize these times have been—" It was heartbreaking, yet the manner in which you've navigated everything. My father would have beamed with pride as well. The venue buzzed with reporters, TV crews, and intrigued spectators eager to learn about the wealthy senior who exposed her thieving daughter-in-law. As I stepped inside, every gaze shifted my way. But unlike before, there was no sympathy or disdain in their stares, just regard, interest, and even awe. Frank stepped up to the lectern initially. "Good morning," he said. "I'm Frank Miller, attorney for Mrs. Dolores, aged 71, who not only fell prey to a scam orchestrated by her daughter-in-law, but played a key role in dismantling a long-running burglary syndicate." Next, he beckoned me forward. Approaching the mic, a peculiar serenity washed over me. For a decade, my voice had been stifled, dismissed, as if my opinions meant nothing. Now a crowd hung on my every word. "I'm Dolores," I started. "Over the last 10 years, I've endured mental torment and ongoing pilfering at the hands of my daughter-in-law, Cynthia. But I need you to grasp that this isn't solely my tale. It's the narrative shared by countless seniors targeted by relatives who view them as vulnerable marks. I went on with my account, not portraying myself as a pitiful casualty. Instead, I shared it as the saga of a resilient individual who guarded vital information until the ideal time, ultimately securing retribution. Cynthia believed I was a doddering senior oblivious to her misdeeds, I explained. Yet she overlooked how my departed spouse instilled in me vigilance, endurance, and cunning. When doubts arose, I avoided rash accusations. Instead, I probed quietly, gathered proof, and bided my time for the optimal strike. A reporter lifted her hand. "Mrs. Dolores, why delay action for so long? Why not alert authorities at the first signs of theft?" "I needed solid proof to prevent Cynthia from twisting the narrative," I answered. "Folks like her excel at posing as the wronged party. Had I moved prematurely without ample documentation, she'd have swayed others into seeing me as a muddled elder, spinning fantasies." Another reporter inquired about my emotions regarding my home serving as a hub for an illicit outfit. Naturally, I sensed deep betrayal, but empowerment too, since ultimately, I halted that illegal enterprise. My alert prompted the captures. My documentation revealed the full conspiracy. Following the media event, remarkable developments unfolded. My line kept buzzing nonstop. Reporters nationwide sought chats with me. Filmmakers aimed to chronicle my journey. Yet the most touching outreach came from fellow seniors who'd caught the broadcast and spotted parallels in their situations. One, named Diana, rang me in tears. "Dolores, your TV appearance hit home. I suspect my son-in-law's swiping my valuables. Items like my jewels keep vanishing, but my daughter insists it's typical forgetfulness in our age. Your words made me question if it's really dementia." Grace shared how her daughter-in-law pushed her to endorse papers she barely comprehended. "Watching your account opened my eyes. I must hire independent counsel, not the one she suggests." These exchanges revealed that my ordeal with Cynthia wasn't isolated. Innumerable older adults suffered exploitation from kin exploiting their faith, often without the means or insight to protect themselves. That evening, Lewis and I delved into a profound, challenging talk about what lay ahead. "Mom," he declared, "I'm filing for divorce from Cynthia. I refuse to stay wed to someone who wounded you deeply and proved criminal." "Are you certain, my boy? That's monumental." "Absolutely. For 10 years, I sided with her against you. That's my gravest error. I won't repeat it." 3 days on, a surprise call arrived from Peter, a TV producer who'd viewed my briefing. "Mrs. Dolores," he began, "I have a pitch for you. Ever thought of hosting a program aiding seniors at risk from relatives?" The concept sparked my curiosity. "Like what?" "One where viewers phone in their experiences, and you dispense guidance drawn from your insights. We could bring in attorneys and therapists for support. Title it something like Dolores's Insights. At 71 for the first time, an opportunity arose to leverage my background and savvy for others' benefit. I'd long been the loyal spouse, the selfless parent, the overlooked in-law. Now, at last, I possessed the chance to become something greater, an advocate, a teacher, a champion for those who'd been muted just like I had, presented itself. "Peter," I told him, "your idea intrigues me, though I come with a few stipulations." That evening, as I got ready for sleep in my own place, I felt truly at home for the first time in ages, pondering all the shifts in my world. Just 7 days earlier, I'd been that overlooked elderly lady no one bothered with. Today, I stood as a recognized personality whose experiences had motivated countless folks to scrutinize their own household dynamics. My cell buzzed with a message from Frank. "Word just came from the FBI. Owing to your situation and Cynthia's details, they've apprehended 6 additional players in the illicit group. Your courage didn't just rescue you, it shielded numerous other households from exploitation." I grinned while switching off the lamp. Cynthia had devoted a decade to rendering me unseen, persuading me of my worthlessness, insisting I was too aged and irrelevant to count. Yet ultimately, it was my resilience, endurance, and smarts that dismantled her campaign of intimidation. The supposedly worthless senior had proven far more formidable than anyone anticipated. 2 weeks post the media event, my existence had veered onto a path I couldn't have foreseen. The program titled Dolores' Wisdom exploded into a nationwide sensation. Daily, we'd field dozens of inquiries from older individuals who'd at last summoned the bravery to recount their tales of domestic mistreatment and pilfering. Frank had formally launched the Dolores Foundation aimed at safeguarding the elderly, kickstarting it with a $200,000 contribution from my hidden legacy. How fitting. The funds Cynthia aimed to pilfer from me now fortified defenses against predators like her. Yet the deepest fulfillment arrived via a phone call from Patrick, my hired investigator, bearing remarkable updates. Dolores, Cynthia's statements have exceeded our hopes. The FBI succeeded in capturing the full syndicate, 15 individuals all together, encompassing the skilled burglars, the dishonest evaluators who rigged assessments, and the gallery owners who snapped up the pilfered artworks. And Cynthia's fate? I inquired. The twist here is compelling. Even with her assistance, the court ruled her offenses too vast for leniency. She's facing 12 years behind federal bars, followed by complete repayment to every affected party upon release. 12 years. Cynthia, who dedicated 10 years to erasing my presence, would now vanish for over a decade herself. But the narrative pressed on. That very afternoon, a shocking ring came through. "Dolores, it's Cynthia." My pulse quickened. "How are you phoning from lockup?" They permitted one call. "Dolores, we must converse." This matters. For a decade, I dodged face-to-face clashes with Cynthia. But with the facts laid bare and her incarcerated, I mustered the resolve to hear her out. "Go on, Cynthia." A prolonged hush followed. Then came a sound I'd never caught before. Cynthia weeping, not the calculated sobs from her capture, but raw, anguished cries. "Dolores, there's something vital I want you to grasp. When I began taking your possessions, I genuinely believed they held no value. But once I saw their worth, halting became impossible. It gripped me like a compulsion, and that excuses a decade of degradations and robberies. No, it offers no excuse. Still, I need you to see I never intended such extremes. Initially, I snagged just a minor pin since we required cash for the trip Lewis craved. Selling it unnoticed led to another item, then more. I stayed quiet as Cynthia unburdened further. "Dolores, honestly, resentment always simmered in me toward you. You possess this stunning residence. You earned Mario's admiration. You lived the existence I desired. Joining this family, I anticipated royal treatment. But you remained the cornerstone. I was merely the boy's spouse. So I cast you as the foe." "Precisely that," she admitted. "And the further I belittled you, the stronger I grew. Diminishing you somehow elevated me." For the first time in 10 years, Cynthia addressed me with unfiltered truth. "Cynthia, do you realize the deepest wound from this mess?" I posed to her. "What is it?" "That across those 10 years, I genuinely sought to bond with you. I aimed to weave you into our customs, pass on Mario's culinary secrets, exchange the home's cherished recollections, and you twisted every bit to wound me." "I get it," she whispered. "I get it, and that's the sharpest pain for me now." Dolores, behind bars, reflection hit me. I wrecked the sole authentic kin I ever knew. My parents ditched me as a teen. Your clan offered my only shot at true belonging, and I threw it away. She wrecked everything, and worse, she wrecked Louis as well. He reached out to me yesterday to say he'd gone ahead and filed for divorce. His wife had explained to him that he couldn't stay married to someone who'd caused his mother such deep pain. It was all true. Louis had been upfront with me from the start about his intentions to end things with Cynthia. I can't keep acting like my marriage stands a chance after all she's done. He'd confided in me. Cynthia, I asked her, why are you sharing this with me? What am I supposed to do with it? I don't expect you to do a thing, she replied. I just needed you to know that I've finally seen what I threw away. It wasn't just my independence I lost, or even my marriage. I lost the chance for a genuine family, for a mother-in-law who actually valued me. I did value you, Cynthia. For so long, I genuinely struggled to figure out your intense dislike for me. I didn't dislike you, she admitted. I was jealous, and that jealousy twisted me into something awful. I ended the call, overwhelmed by a confusing swirl of feelings. I'd longed for a decade to hear Cynthia own up to her actions. Yet when she at last did, there was no sense of triumph. Instead, sorrow washed over me. For the years squandered, for the chances at a harmonious family that slipped away. That evening, Louis joined me for dinner, a ritual we'd adopted since Cynthia's arrest. Over our meal, I recounted the conversation. Was she really meaning it? He wondered. I believe she's at last confronting the consequences of her choices, I answered. But Louis, the key now isn't if Cynthia grasps her mistakes. It's about what we take from this ordeal. How so? We let a poisonous influence dominate our family for 10 years. I won't ever again let someone erase me in my own space, and I trust you'll never permit mistreatment of those you cherish. Louis gave a serious nod. Mom, this has been the toughest lesson of my life. I won't prioritize false calm over standing up for justice anymore. The following day brought even brighter tidings. The Dolores Foundation got an anonymous $5 million gift from a prosperous family spared from exploitation, all because of the details we'd aired on our program. Frank filled me in. Dolores, the Petersons caught your episode last week. Mrs. Peterson spotted the identical warning signs in her granddaughter, pushing for signatures on papers, pushing for a move to assisted living, taking bits of jewelry on loan. Your account prompted her to bring in a private investigator who uncovered a plot mirroring Cynthia's. They halted it just in time. The granddaughters in custody, and Mrs. Peterson reclaimed all the pilfered items. She credits your show with safeguarding not just her wealth, but likely her very existence. It was astonishing to realize how my ordeal, my suffering, had evolved into a shield for others. Cynthia had devoted 10 years to undermining my self-respect and value, yet ultimately, that trial had forged a mission far beyond my wildest dreams. As I got ready for bed that night, I pondered the remarkable turns my existence had taken. Just a month earlier, I'd been a sidelined older woman, feeling redundant in her household. Today, I stood as a nationwide champion for elders' rights, hosting a thriving TV series and leading a foundation that protected countless households. Cynthia aimed to shatter me, but she ignited a resilience I never knew existed within. The truest payback wasn't watching her behind bars. It was unearthing my true self once I found the bravery to fight back. A year on from Cynthia's apprehension, my world had shifted in unimaginable ways. Dolores' wisdom had surged to the top ratings in its slot. Aired across 32 nations, the Dolores Foundation had aided over 1,000 households in spotting and thwarting elder financial exploitation. Yet the deepest change was internal, not in the spotlight. This morning, while tending the blooms in the garden Mario and I had nurtured for 40 years, I got a startling guest. Louis showed up with a poised woman in her 40s, dark hair, a warm, authentic grin that evoked Mario's own. "Mom," Louis said, his voice tinged with anxiety, "I'd like you to meet someone important. This is Nicole, and, we've been together for the last 6 months." Nicole stepped forward with poise and deference. "Mrs. Dolores, I've heard your full tale from Louis. You're truly motivating for women everywhere, regardless of age." What struck me first about Nicole was the sincere regard in her eyes, no trace of the patronizing attitude Cynthia had shown for years. When she began to speak, she spoke right to me, ignoring Louise as though I didn't exist. "Nicole," I ventured, "what's your take on my son seeing you while he's still legally wed?" Louise's face drained of color, yet Nicole just grinned. "Mrs. Dolores, I value your straightforwardness. Louis shared the full details about Cynthia with me right from the start of our romance. The divorce got sealed just last week. I'd never get involved with a wedded guy, regardless of the situation." Her candor won me over. "And how do you feel about gaining a celebrity mother-in-law who goes on TV discussing household woes?" Nicole let out a real chuckle. "Truth be told, I'm honored. You turned a nightmare into a force that's aiding countless folks. That takes real grit." In the months that followed, I watched Louis and Nicole's bond unfold. It stood in stark contrast to his union with Cynthia. Nicole urged Louis to carve out moments with me, fold me into their outings, and cherish my views. At their hosted meals, they welcomed me as the family's cornerstone, not some obligation to endure. The biggest shift. Nicole truly sought to understand me. She inquired about my time with Mario, the backstory of our home, our kin customs. Rather than shoving aside or wiping out old memories, she aimed to weave herself into our lineage's ongoing thread. One evening, while Nicole and I whipped up a meal side by side, she posed a question that caught me off guard. "Mrs. Dolores, how can I ensure I don't turn into someone like Cynthia?" I halted, mulling it over. "Nicole, Cynthia ended up that way because she viewed our clan as a resource to plunder, not a circle to enrich. You're already on a better path just by wondering about it. But let's get concrete. What habits should I steer clear of? Don't ever attempt to cut Louis off from his relatives. Avoid bad-mouthing me behind my back. Never dismiss my thoughts because of my age. And if issues arise between us, address them with me head on. Skip using Louis as your go-between for schemes." Nicole absorbed it all with a solemn nod. "And what steps can I take up front to shine as a daughter-in-law? Acknowledge that this home, this lineage, had a legacy long before you joined. Honor that while adding your own chapters. Remember, belonging to a family involves offering as much as you gain." 6 months on, Louis invited me along to pick out an engagement band for Nicole. The twist. It echoed back to Cynthia swiping that 3 million piece. Now here I was, guiding my boy and selecting a token of true affection. "Mom," he said while we eyed various choices, "am I doing the smart thing? Can Nicole and I forge something enduring after the mess with Cynthia?" "Louis, what sets Nicole apart from Cynthia is her regard for our family as a treasure worth safeguarding. Cynthia treated it like a target for gain. That core distinction changes everything." The proposal went off flawlessly. Louis set up a supper in our dining space, the very spot where Cynthia had long made me feel like an outsider for years. This round, though, I claimed the top seat as the family's elder, while Louis popped the question to Nicole. Upon her joyful yes, she rushed straight to embrace me. "Mrs. Dolores," she murmured through misty eyes, "I hope to be the in-law you merit." "Nicole," I answered, "you already measure up." The nuptials marked our most joyful kin gathering in more than 10 years. Nicole had pushed for the rites in our yard, paying tribute to the foundation Mario and I established. Midway through the vows, Louis called on me for some remarks. 2 years back, I started, I figured my household tale closed in shame and deceit. Yet now I see that ordeal as merely a chapter's close, not the whole volume's finale. Nicole, step into a household that's learned to prize shared regard, truthfulness, and heartfelt bonds. Post-ceremony, with revelers toasting in the yard, a surprise note pinged my phone. It came from Karen, a longtime viewer of my program. "Dolores, I needed you to hear how your narrative emboldened me to turn in my boy for nicking my pills to peddle them. Your boldness helped me reclaim my self-worth and well-being. He's in recovery now, and our tie is mending. You sparked my own resolve." Such notes kept coming, from folks worldwide who'd mustered the will to uphold their boundaries after my account. It showed how my hardships had morphed into a force for good and impact. That evening, once the crowd dispersed, I lingered solo in the yard, pondering what an incredible path I had traveled. Just 2 years back, I was a forgotten old lady, tormented by a daughter-in-law who treated me like a burden. Today, I'm a prominent voice for change, blessed with a daughter-in-law who truly honors me, and the guiding force of a household restored through trust and affection. My phone buzzed once more. It was Frank. "Dolores, I've got the latest on Cynthia. The court turned down her appeal. She's facing the entire 12-year term." And what emotions stirred in me then? I wondered out loud. That's something only you can decide. Honestly, resentment toward Cynthia had faded away. Instead, compassion took its place. She'd been given a real shot at belonging to a loving family, yet she tossed it aside for selfish desires and jealousy. Meanwhile, she'd rot behind bars for 12 years as I thrived in the fresh start I'd forged through my resilience and resolve. "Frank," I replied, "Cynthia's chapter in my life is closed. These days, my narrative revolves around the countless households we've supported, the renewed bond with Louis, the amazing daughter-in-law by my side, and the enduring impact I'm creating." Once I ended the call, I gazed skyward at the twinkling lights and murmured, "Mario, I trust you're smiling down." The overlooked senior who nearly forfeited it all had at last discovered her strength, her influence, and her mission. True payback wasn't about ruining Cynthia, it was about reconstructing my own world. If my tale resonated with you, consider showing support with a super thanks so I can share more tales like this. Your generosity means everything up front. Now, over to you. How would you handle a situation like this? I'm eager for your insights, so share them below. I genuinely value your perspectives. Also, tell me where you first came across this account. Craving additional real-life narratives? Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Plenty more await.